Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into something that, well, it probably affects more people than you think, but it's often pretty confusing. Pollen Food Allergy Syndrome. PFAS for short.
That's the term we use now, yeah. It used to be called Oral Allergy Syndrome, or OAS, but PFAS is more accurate.
Okay, so our goal today is pretty clear. We've got this huge international Delphi consensus report from the AAI, plus a stack of supporting research. We're going to boil it all down for you.
Yep, distill it into clear, actionable insights on how PFAS is diagnosed and, crucially, how it's managed.
And this isn't some niche thing, is it? It's actually really common.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking 50, maybe even up to 70% of people who already have pollen allergies experiencing this. But the advice they get has been all over the place. This consensus report is trying to fix that, get everyone on the same page.
All right, let's start right at the beginning. For anyone listening, what exactly is PFAS, fundamentally?
Okay, so at its heart, PFAS is a hypersensitivity reaction. Think immediate allergy symptoms. But here's the key.
Yeah.
It's a reaction to plant-based foods that only happens because you are already sensitized to airborne pollen. Hay fever, seasonal allergies. That's pollenosis.
Oh, okay. So you need the pollen allergy first. It's not like developing a peanut allergy out of the blue. It's a cross reaction.
Exactly right. Driven by that prior pollen sensitization.
Wow.
And the reactions themselves, usually super fast, like right when the food hits your mouth.
And typically mild.
Typically, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Symptoms are usually just in the mouth or throat itching, maybe a bit of tingling, slight swelling. And they tend to go away on their own pretty quickly, often less than half an hour. Transient is the word we use.
Okay, let's unpack the big question then. If I'm allergic to birch pollen, just the pollen floating in the air, why does eating a raw apple suddenly make my mouth itchy? That seems weird.
It does seem weird, but there's a solid immunological reason. It's called immunological cross-reactivity. Basically, your immune system gets confused.
Confused how?
Well, it's made these IgE antibodies designed to target specific proteins in, say, birch pollen. But it turns out that certain proteins in foods, like apples, look really, really similar. Structurally, we call it homology.
So the antibody thinks the apple protein is the pollen protein, like a mistaken identity situation.
Precisely. It's like having a key for the pollen lock, but the apple protein's lock is so similar that the key fits, turns, and bang, triggers the allergic reaction.
Okay, that makes sense.
And here's the really crucial part, the thing that helps us understand the risk.
Yeah.
It all comes down to how stable those food proteins are. We basically divide them into two groups.
All right, let's start with the first group, the ones that cause less trouble.
Exactly. These are the labile, or heat-sensitive proteins. Think PR10 proteins and profilins. These guys are fragile.
Fragile meaning?
Meaning they break down really easily.
Yeah.
Heat destroys them, and so does the acid and the enzymes in your stomach. Because they fall apart so fast, the allergic reaction usually stays mild and just in the mouth or throat.
Can you give us a classic example of that chain reaction?
Sure. The big one is birch pollen. Its main allergen is called BETV1. That's a PR10 protein. And BETV1 is notorious for cross-reacting with similar proteins like MALD1 in raw apples, CORA1 in raw hazelnuts, and DAOC1 in raw carrots.
So if I'm allergic to birch and a raw apple makes my mouth itch, does that mean apple pie is okay? Because the heat killed the protein.
In most cases, absolutely yes. The cooking destroys that labile MALD1 protein. But now compare that to the other category, the stable or heat-resistant proteins.
Okay, so these are the tough ones.
Right. Things like lipid transfer proteins, LTPs, are the classic example, but also gibberellin-regulated proteins, GRPs, and thaumatin-like proteins, TLPs. These are designed by the plant to be tough, defensive proteins.
And stable means they don't break down easily.
Exactly. They resist heat, they resist digestion, they can actually survive the stomach and travel further down into your gut, or even get absorbed into your bloodstream still intact.
Which means more chance of a serious reaction.
Precisely. Because they can trigger the immune system beyond just the mouth. The textbook example here is PRU-P3, an LTP found in peaches. If you react to PRU-P3, eating even a raw peach carries a higher risk of systemic symptoms, things happening outside your mouth and throat.
Got it. So the big takeaway here is the type of protein involved tells you a lot about the risk. Labile protein usually means localized symptoms, maybe fixed by cooking. Stable protein means a higher risk of systemic issues, even with cooking sometimes.
That's the core concept. It's the molecular key to figuring out the risk level.
Now, you said PFAS is usually mild, but systemic reactions can happen. How common is it for that itchy mouth to turn into something more widespread or dangerous?
Yeah, it's really important to get the perspective right. Systemic reactions like severe stomach upset, breaking out in hives all over, or even anaphylaxis, they're definitely uncommon.
How uncommon are we talking?
Globally, the reports generally say somewhere between 2% and maybe 10% of PFAS cases involve systemic symptoms. And really severe outcomes, like anaphylaxis, are probably in the 1% to 2% range of those cases.
Yeah.
So rare.
But not zero.
But not zero. And you do see variations. There was one study in Korea, for instance, that reported anaphylaxis in nearly 9% of their PFAS patients. So while it's mostly benign, you absolutely cannot be complacent. Vigilance is key.
Okay, and this is where it gets really fascinating for me, the cofactors. You're saying there are things that can take someone who usually just gets a bit of mouth tingling and suddenly push them towards a much worse reaction.
Yes, the consensus report really highlighted these. And some might surprise you. Medications are a big one. Specifically, proton pump inhibitors, PPIs.
Wait, PPIs like for acid reflux? How on earth does lowering stomach acid make a mouth allergy worse?
It seems counterintuitive, right? But think back to those labile proteins we talked about, the fragile ones.
Okay, the ones that usually break down easily.
Right. Stomach acid is actually a key player in breaking them down. So if you're taking a PPI, you reduce that acid shield. More of those labile proteins can survive the stomach intact, travel further down the digestive tract.
And potentially cause a bigger reaction because more of the intact allergen gets absorbed. Wow.
Exactly. It allows proteins that should have been neutralized to potentially trigger a systemic response. It's a really important link for patients managing both conditions.
That's huge. What else is on that cofactor list?
NSAIDs like ibuprofen or naproxen and beta blockers are also mentioned. Then there are factors like having had bariatric surgery, which obviously changes your gut. Uncontrolled asthma is a known risk factor for more severe allergic reactions in general. Also, interestingly, fasting and even intense exercise.
Exercise. How does going for a run make my apple allergy worse?
Yeah, exercise is actually a known cofactor for food-induced anaphylaxis more broadly, not just PFAS.
Yeah.
The thinking is that intense activity might increase gut permeability, make it a bit leakier temporarily, and maybe alter blood flow, allowing more intact allergen to get into your system.
Okay, that's wild. And it's not just what you eat, but how you eat it.
Absolutely. Dose and speed matter. If you consume the food very rapidly or eat a large amount, that's a risk factor, and especially if it's in liquid form.
Like juices or smoothies.
Precisely. Think about a fresh fruit smoothie or maybe a soy milk beverage. If soy is a trigger for someone, you're bypassing a lot of the initial breakdown in the mouth. You're delivering a big hit of the allergen very quickly. It can just overwhelm the system's ability to cope locally.
So the bottom line from the experts is find these modifiable risk factors, the meds, the exercise timing, maybe the smoothie habit, and manage them. Because that could potentially lower the risk of a serious reaction, even from an allergy that usually seems minor.
Exactly. It shifts the focus to proactive risk management tailored to the individual.
Okay, so let's get practical. Based on this big consensus report, what are the day-to-day management recommendations? What should people actually do?
All right, first up is education and avoidance, but it's targeted avoidance. The main rule is pretty simple. Avoid eating the raw form of the specific food that caused your reaction.
The index reaction food?
Exactly. The one that definitely caused symptoms for you.
But because of those labile proteins, there's that big exception, cooking.
Correct. If you only ever get oral symptoms, the consensus is you can usually safely eat that same fruit or vegetable if it's been thoroughly cooked. Because as we said, the heat usually breaks down those fragile proteins. They become harmless.
Though the panel did add a note of caution about how you cook it, right?
Yes, very important point. Light cooking methods, like maybe a quick steam or a brief stir fry, might not be enough heat for long enough to fully destroy the protein. You really need thorough cooking.
And what about nuts? They mentioned nuts specifically.
Right. Nuts often contain more stable allergens anyway. The panel specifically noted that roasting, while it involves heat, might not be sufficient to eliminate the risk for nut-related PFAS. So don't assume roasted nuts are automatically safe if raw ones cause issues.
That's a critical detail. Something else I thought was really sensible was the panel's stance on avoiding over-avoidance.
Oh, absolutely. This was a major point. They strongly recommended against just giving patients a huge long list of every single food that could theoretically cross-react with their pollen allergy, especially foods they've never reacted to.
Why not? Seems like being cautious.
because it can cause huge anxiety, and it often leads to people cutting out loads of healthy foods unnecessarily, which can impact their nutrition and quality of life, all based on a theoretical risk that might never happen for them. The focus should be on the foods that actually cause reactions.
That makes so much sense. Okay, what about treating a reaction when it happens? Say, my mouth starts itching after a bite of peach.
Well, the good news is, for those mild, just-in-the-mouth symptoms, they often just fade away on their own within about 30 minutes. No treatment needed.
But if it's really uncomfortable,
Then a standard non-sedating antihistamine is fine. Some people prefer liquid or chewable forms, thinking they might work a bit faster right there in the mouth, which makes sense theoretically.
okay. Now, the big question. Who needs to carry an epinephrine auto-injector, an EAI?
The guidance here is quite clear now. An EAI should definitely be offered, prescribed, to anyone who has had a confirmed systemic reaction. So any symptoms that went clearly beyond just the mouth and throat.
Ooh, okay, that's straightforward. But what if someone's only ever had mild mouth itching, but they have one of those risk factors we talked about, like they take PPIs or have asthma?
Yes. For that group only, oral symptoms,
Yeah.
but T, they've known high-risk cofactors, the panel recommends a shared decision-making approach,
Meaning?
meaning the doctor and patient need to talk it through, discuss the generally low risk of severe reactions in PFAS, but weigh that against the patient's specific risk factors. Then, together, they decide if prescribing an EAI makes sense for that individual's peace of mind and safety profile.
Got it. Shared decision. And finally, what about allergy shots? Immunotherapy, AIT. It works wonders for hay fever itself. Does it fix the food part too?
Yeah, this is another area where the consensus was very firm, and maybe a bit disappointing for some. The evidence just isn't there. Pollen AIT, whether shots or under-the-tongue drops, is not proven to reliably get rid of PFAS symptoms.
So having PFAS isn't by itself a reason to get allergy shots.
Correct. PFAS alone is not an indication for starting AIT. Doctors really need to counsel patients that we just don't have enough proof right now to recommend AIT specifically for managing the food cross-reactivity symptoms.
That's a really important clarification from the global experts. Okay, let's shift to diagnosis. If the standard allergy skin tests with commercial extracts often miss PFAS because those fragile proteins degrade in the extract, how do allergists actually pin this down?
Yeah, it's a practical challenge, but there's a neat old-school solution that works really well. The preferred method, highlighted by the panel, is prick-to-prick testing.
P to prick. What does that involve?
It's exactly what it sounds like. You take the actual fresh, raw fruit or vegetable in question. You prick the food first with the testing needle, getting some of the juice and protein on it, and then you immediately use that same needle to prick the patient's skin.
So you're testing directly with the fresh food, ensuring those fragile, labile proteins are actually present for the test.
Precisely. It bypasses the problem of protein degradation in commercial extracts. It's simple, but effective.
That's clever. But for really digging into the risk level, you mentioned something called component-resolved diagnostics, CRD.
Yes, CRD is a much more advanced blood test. Instead of just testing against the whole food extract, it looks for IgE antibodies against specific individual allergenic proteins, the actual molecules.
So instead of just saying allergic to apple, it could tell you which protein in the apple you're reacting to, like the BET-V1 cross-reactive one, MAL-D1.
Exactly. Or, in the case of peach, it could tell you if you're reacting to the labile PR10 protein, PRU-P1, or the stable LTP, PRU-P3. And knowing which specific component you react to tells us so much more about your likely risk profile. Labile component, probably just oral symptoms. Stable component, like an LTP, higher risk of systemic reaction. It allows for much more personalized advice.
That's a real step towards precision medicine in allergy. Are there other tools on the horizon?
The panel mentioned a few things being explored. The basophil activation test, or BCT, is one. It's another blood test that tries to see if your actual allergy cells, basophils, react when exposed to the allergen. It might help sort out if someone is just sensitized, meaning they have the antibodies but no symptoms, versus truly allergic. And believe it or not, AI, artificial intelligence, is being looked at.
AI for allergies. How?
Well, potentially by analyzing complex patterns in a patient's test results, their history, their cofactors. Maybe AI could identify subtle risk profiles that humans might miss, helping to better predict who is at higher risk for severe reactions. Still early days, but interesting.
Definitely sounds like the future. Okay, this has been incredibly insightful. So wrapping it all up, the big message seems to be managing PFAS is all about precision. It's about knowing the difference between those fragile labile proteins and the tough, stable ones.
Identifying your personal cofactors like medications or exercise timing.
And crucially, avoiding those overly broad, anxiety-inducing food restrictions. Focus on what actually affects you.
Absolutely. But maybe before we finish, there's one more layer to consider how PFAS fits into the bigger picture. It's not happening in a vacuum. PFAS is clearly part of this broader trend, this allergy epidemic we're seeing globally.
Right, and you're saying things like climate change are actually playing a role in this specific condition.
That's the final provocative thought, yes. The rising prevalence of PFAS seems linked to bigger environmental shifts, urbanization, pollution levels, and definitely climate change. It's demonstrably making pollen seasons longer.
Longer seasons mean more pollen exposure over time.
It's exactly. More intense exposure, maybe exposure happening at different times of the year than it used to. It's blurring those traditional seasonal lines. And this changing environment directly impacts patient risk and how often they might react. It means we constantly need to adapt how we manage these conditions.
So the final thought for everyone listening is you need to think beyond just the food itself. Consider how these larger environmental changes, like shifting pollen seasons, might be influencing your own allergy picture. Really fascinating stuff.
That's all for this deep dive.